Hi there. In 2020, the PS5 launched with one video game. By 2021, it had 3 video games. Then to 2022, it had 3 still. Halfway through 2023, it went back to 2 games because Ratchet & Clank and Returnal came to PC, but now, October 2023, the PS5 finally has its 3rd video game. Again. Spider-Man 2018 was one of my favourite games of the PS4 era, and it definitely felt state of the art at the time. An open world that could be explored top to bottom with no loading screens, complemented by amazing traversal, combat and industry-leading animations. It was a technical achievement that made the most out of the limited hardware, so what has been done in Spider-Man 2 to evolve this formula? And how does it justify the PS5 exclusivity while games like God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West were cross-generation? This video has no spoilers for the story of Spider-Man 2, but it does spoil 2 throwaway scenes from the FNAF movie, so watch out for that, I guess. Spider-Man 2 starts off with this massive scale mission, which I think is there to do one thing: act as a tutorial and also show just how much faster the traversal is.
That's 2 things.
There's a few new toys at your disposal. You've got the wingsuit and the slingshot, but it's the core swinging that's seen the biggest change. There is more of a focus on momentum. Hey GLaDOS, what's momentum?
Momentum.
Thank you, GLaDOS. It's not a massive change, but it helps to make the swinging feel a little more engaging. However, most people probably didn't even notice this, as there's a setting in the accessibility menu called Swing Assist, which is maxed out by default, which helps to make it so your momentum is basically never lost, feeling a lot more like these 2 games. When you turn this down, swinging becomes a lot less brainless, and I think I prefer it this way. When maxed out, Spider-Man will just hover above the floor if you swing too late, meaning the game doesn't really punish you. Lowering this setting means you have to time it right, and also makes the arc of your swings a little more realistic by sort of pulling you into the buildings instead of keeping you dead straight. Obviously it's completely up to you how you want the swinging to feel. It's an accessibility option after all, but I think I prefer it around a 3 out of 10. Now if you want another setting to alter, turn on full damage, because it's funny. If you go back to Spider-Man 1, you'll see that there's actually quite a significant difference. It feels so slow, it makes me feel ill. This is definitely one of the best traversal systems in any game, and I've talked before about why this is important in this video. Basically, it doesn't really matter how good your side missions and set pieces are. If it's slow and a drag to get there, I might miss out on them. This is basically the opposite in this game, but I'll get to that later. Alright class, why do we think this game is called Spider-Man 2? Window Ledge, that would be because it's the 2nd game in the series. No, you're wrong. You're so stupid. It's the 3rd game in the series. This is called Spider-Man 2 because you've got 2 Spider-Men, and you can switch between them as you please. This created a really nice dynamic as Miles and Peter each have their own combat abilities, animations and missions to complete. These differences were obvious across these 2 games, but having them both on the same stage really highlights it. They each have their own finishes. Peter's abilities focus a bit more on his technological prowess, while Miles uses his electricity powers. Peter's swinging is a bit more efficient and low-key, while Miles is a bit more erratic and really has that exaggerated swagger of a... Who wrote these lines, man? Anyway, we're going to talk about the combat. The combat as a whole feels pretty unchanged, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does feel a bit repetitive. While Spider-Man himself is fast, zipping from enemy to enemy, dodging rockets and stuff, the encounters themselves drag on quite a bit because every enemy is overdosed on goddamn Terraria Iron Skin potions, meaning it takes me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 punches to kill a guy. Why do I have to throw a guy at the ground 10 times like a basketball? Actually, that makes sense. Spider-Man sucks at basketball. Every enemy just feels like a bullet sponge, and might I remind you, I'm Spider-Man. I can stop a train with my hands, but as soon as I have to fight a college student, that's too far. Because of how many times I have to hit square, it makes the combat feel a bit repetitive, but it makes up for this by being super cinematic, but also by introducing new environments and sometimes fighting alongside someone. There's a chance that the other Spider-Man will join you in a random encounter, creating the opportunity for new finishes, and you can hug at the end. And as you progress through the story, there are some other partners you can fight with. It really helps to keep a fairly repetitive combat system feel fresh. There's also a nice variety of enemies. Some have to be parried while others grapple to lampposts and shoot you with bows. Now I've been playing Bloodborne, Elden Ring and The Last of Us 2 recently, all of which have these awful dog enemies that make me want to end it all. So it's nice to see a game that has enemies other than dogs. Now let's talk about the missions and the story. Spider-Man 1 had some great story missions, but there's also these ones where you don't actually play as Spider-Man, but rather MJ. and they're kinda boring. Now I understand you can't have every mission be a winner, because these games are trying to tell a story, and sometimes you need these slower parts in order to do this. But it was pretty unanimous that these were the worst part of Spider-Man 1. Now, Spider-Man 2 also has these missions, but they've been improved a lot. You've still got this insane disparity, perhaps even more so. You go from fighting a 100-meter tall sand demon to someone who's like, "Hey Peter, please help me kill these 20 wasps." The MJ missions are back, but now she has a taser and she's actually the most powerful character in the game. She literally one-shots people, and might I remind you that Spider-Man needs to play ping pong with one of Kraven's goons in order to beat them. Either way, these slower parts feel much better to play than in the first two games. The side content has also seen an improvement. They tell stories about characters from previous games and are more than just go to a place and activate the tower. There's one side mission that I thought was actually pretty emotional, and I was close to tearing up until these guys vanished and Peter started talking to himself, but that's beside the point. The point is that the side content has seen an improvement. It's not been completely reinvented, but it's just a bit better, you know? Now back to what I was saying about traversal, and that if it's a drag to get around, I might miss out on some great content. That's kind of the opposite in Spider-Man 2. The traversal is so good, and the side content is, you know, it's not bad, but it doesn't make me get out of bed in the morning. And the story itself is pretty good. I'd say on par with the first game, which I really liked. I'm not super well versed in Spider-Man lore, but I can't imagine it's a story that hasn't been told before in some other piece of media. But it's great, nonetheless.
PlayStation.
As I mentioned at the start of the video, this game is a PS5 exclusive. It's been 3 years since the console launched, but we might finally be seeing the death of the old generation. But the question is, what sets it apart from other Sony exclusives that did come out on both generations? A few things, maybe. The faster traversal of Spider-Man 2 versus the first two games is probably only possible thanks to the much faster storage of the PS5. It's nice to see an advancement in technology translate to better gameplay, rather than a game with 10 more polygons per square inch. I mean, Spider-Man 2 could probably run on the PS4 with a few tweaks, but this is obviously exclusive to be a system seller, and it's done pretty well so far. But the game also makes really great use of the controller. You get different haptics based on what material you walk on, and the triggers themselves have different behaviours based on what you're doing, and this conversation doesn't translate well into video, so I'm gonna move on. The best thing I can say about Spider-Man 2 in this day and age is that it works. It functions as intended. So many games that come out nowadays are either missing a ton of content or just so horribly optimised. City Skylines 2 came out recently and the fastest graphics card yet created can barely handle it. Cyberpunk took nearly 3 years to get to an acceptable state. The fact that saying a game works is a compliment shows how bad the situation is at the moment. I really hope this changes, but it probably won't. Spider-Man 2 feels like a pretty safe sequel, which definitely isn't a bad thing. It takes the established formula from the first two games and refines it to the highest level yet. It should be used as an example to show the standard of quality that developers should strive for from this point on. It's definitely made the most use out of the PS5 so far, and now Sony only has one job: make more games like this and port Bloodborne to PC.
That's 2 jobs.